The Terminus Nebula had always been a graveyard of dreams and broken ambitions. For 3 standard months, the Corvin salvage fleet had been methodically picking through the debris field like vultures circling a fresh kill. Twisted metal fragments, the remnants of 1,000 forgotten battles, drifted silently through the cosmic void. Each piece told a story of violence, conquest, and ultimate defeat. Commander Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Prophet's Edge, watching his crew work with the cold efficiency of seasoned scavengers. The Corvins were a practical species tall, reptilian beings with natural patience and an eye for valuable salvage. They'd built their entire civilization on the bones of dead empires, and business had never been better. Another plasma conduit. Cluster at coordinate 77 Alpha reported his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Gorak. Looks like it came from one of those old hegemony destroyers. Vex nodded absently, his attention focused on the profit margins scrolling across his personal display. The Terminus Nebula was a goldmine of ancient technology, but most of it was fragmented beyond repair. Still, even scrap metal from the old wars commanded decent prices in the Outer Rim markets. That's when Navigator Thane's voice crackled through the CUM system. Trembling with an emotion Vex rarely heard from his experienced crew, "Commander, you need to see this. Grid reference 9 and Delta? We've got something ... big." Vex's scaled fingers danced across the holographic controls, shifting the main display to Thane's coordinates. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Floating among the debris like a sleeping giant was a ship unlike anything in the known galaxy. It was colossally 3 times the length of their heavy cruiser and twice as wide. The vessel's angular design spoke of pure military function, every line and curve engineered for maximum lethality. "By the void," whispered Thane, his tentacles trembling as the ship's sensors swept the ancient vessel. "It's been dead for millennia." The hull was a masterwork of unknown metallurgy, a patchwork of materials that seemed to shift and shimmer. Under the nebula's ethereal light, massive scorch marks and weapon impacts covered its surface evidence of battles. So fierce they'd left permanent scars in the metal itself. But what truly caught Vex's attention were the symbols. Etched into the hull's surface, these weren't random markings or decorative elements. They were angular, aggressive symbols that seemed to pulse with barely contained menace, as if the ship itself was a predator merely sleeping, not dead. The writing was unlike anything in the galactic database, is primitive yet sophisticated, conveying a sense of raw power that made Vex's scales ripple with involuntary fear. "Energy readings?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Science." Officer Crix's voice came through the CUM with clinical precision. "No energy signatures detected, Commander. Whatever this is, it's been floating here since before the Empire. Maybe even before the Hegemony Wars." Now that was interesting. The Hegemony Wars had ended over 5,000 years ago, marking the last time anyone had seen technology this advanced. If this ship predated even that conflict, it could be worth more than entire star systems. Vex's eyes gleamed with the kind of greed that had made him rich beyond most beings' wildest dreams. Ancient relics commanded astronomical prices in the core worlds, especially military hardware from the old wars. The right collector would pay a fortune for even a single intact weapon system from this era. But an entire ship? This find would make his crew rich beyond imagination. Sir Gorak's voice interrupted his calculations. "There's something else. The ship's design? It doesn't match any known species in the database. That was impossible. The Galactic database contained records of every spacefaring civilization from the past 10,000 years. Even extinct species had left traces, archaeological evidence of their existence. For a ship this advanced to have no record whatsoever suggested something truly extraordinary. "Unknown species means unknown technology," Vex muttered, his mind already calculating the potential profits. "An unknown technology means ... allowing the implications to sink in. Unlimited value." The bridge fell silent as his crew absorbed this revelation. They'd stumbled upon something that could change their lives forever, not just rich, but wealthy enough to retire to pleasure worlds and never work again. "Prepare boarding parties," Vex ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made countless life-changing decisions. Full salvage crews. I want every compartment mapped, every system cataloged. We're going in. As the Corvin shuttles prepared to launch, their crews checking equipment and running final diagnostics, none of them noticed the subtle change beginning deep within the derelict's hull. Far below the scarred surface, in chambers that had been sealed for millennia, ancient systems stirred. Emergency power cells, designed to last far beyond their creators' lifespans, began to hum with renewed purpose. A faint red glow emanated from deep within the ship's core, pulsing like a heartbeat. The light grew stronger, spreading through conduits and corridors that had known only darkness for thousands of years. It was as if the ship itself was awakening from a long, dreamless sleep, but the most ominous sign of all was barely visible on the vessel's scarred bow. Where eons of cosmic debris had scraped away layers of hull plating, they're etched in letters that seemed to burn with their own inner fire. It was a name that would have sent chills through any human who saw it. Asterisk, USS Retribution, asterisk, the boarding parties launched, their pilots eager to claim their share of the greatest salvage find in galactic history. Behind them, the ancient ship continued its silent awakening, systems coming online one by one. Soon, very soon, Galaxy would remember why some things were better left undisturbed. What they were about to discover would change everything they thought they knew about power, about war, and about the true meaning of human determination. But that's a story that deserves its own telling one, that explores how the power of compounding can turn even the smallest advantages into universe-changing forces. The plasma torches hissed and sparked as they carved through the outer airlock like a hot knife through butter. Team leader Grax watched with satisfaction as the ancient metal gave way to his crew's cutting equipment. After all, what kind of security could a dead ship possibly have? The Corvins had been salvaging derelicts for generations. This was just another payday, albeit a much bigger one. The airlock cycled open with a pneumatic wheeze that seemed to echo through eternity. Beyond lay corridors so vast they could have housed entire city blocks. The ceilings soared 30 feet above their heads, supported by massive structural beams that dwarfed even the largest Corvin architecture. Everything about this place screamed of beings much larger and far more physically imposing than the reptilian salvage crew. "Well, at least we won't have to duck," joked Engineer Zoke, his nervous laughter echoing off the metallic walls. But his humor died quickly as their helmet lights swept across the corridor walls. What they revealed made even these hardened salvagers pause in stunned silence. The walls weren't just corridors, they were weapon systems. Massive plasma cannons were built directly into the ship's infrastructure, their barrels easily large, enough for a Corvin to crawl through. Point defense clusters bristled from every junction, their targeting sensors dark but somehow still menacing. This wasn't just a warship, it was a flying fortress designed for one purpose: absolute destruction. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically above them, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and shift with malevolent purpose. The intermittent illumination created a strobing effect that made the weapon systems appear to move, as if they were tracking the intruders with mechanical patience. "These power conduits," Zoke muttered, running his scanner along a massive cable that snaked along the corridor floor. The readings made his eyes widen in disbelief. "They're designed for energy outputs that would melt our ships into vapor." Cable was easily 6 feet in diameter, composed of materials that their scanners couldn't even identify. Whatever power source this ship used, it operated on a scale that defied comprehension. The energy requirements suggested weapon systems capable of cracking planets or shields, strong enough to withstand the combined firepower of entire fleets. Deeper they ventured into the ship's bowels, their footsteps echoing ominously in the vast corridors. They passed armories that stretched beyond the reach of their lights, filled with weapons of unknown design, massive rifle-like devices hung from automated dispensers, their barrels glowing with residual energy even after millennia of dormancy. Each weapon was sized for hands much larger than any known species, suggesting warriors of truly terrifying proportions. The barracks they discovered could have housed an entire army. Thousands of bunks lined the walls in perfect military order, each one sized for beings nearly twice the height of a Corvin. Personal effects still remained helmets, boots, and equipment that spoke of a military culture focused on discipline. An overwhelming force. How many soldiers did this thing carry? Whispered Communications Officer Nex, her voice barely audible through the comm system. Enough to conquer star systems, Grax replied grimly. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a warship, it was a mobile invasion force. It was capable of projecting power across vast distances with surgical precision. But it was the ship's layout that truly revealed its purpose. Every corridor, every junction, every room was designed with military efficiency in mind. There were no recreational areas, no civilian quarters, no spaces for anything but war. The architecture itself was a weapon quarters that could be easily defended, blast doors that could seal off sections in seconds, and redundant systems that would keep the ship fighting even after catastrophic damage. Then they found the bridge. The command center was a cathedral of violence, its soaring architecture designed to intimidate and inspire awe. Tactical displays covered every surface, showing star charts of a galaxy the Corvins didn't recognize. The constellations were wrong, the stellar formations completely alien. Either this ship came from another galaxy entirely, or it was so ancient. That stellar drift had completely rearranged the night sky. At the center of this technological temple sat a command throne that seemed carved from a single piece of black metal. The chair itself was massive, designed for a being of truly imposing stature, and upon it sat the preserved remains of something that had once been terrifyingly alive. The figure was humanoid, but larger than any known species, even seated it. Stood nearly 8 feet tall, its frame suggesting incredible physical power. Cybernetic implants covered much of its skull, while mechanical augmentations replaced entire limbs. This was no ordinary warrior. It was a fusion of flesh and machine, a being that had transcended normal biological limitations. "Look at the size of it," breathed Grax, his voice filled with mixture of awe and terror. "What kind of species builds ships like this? More importantly, what kind of species needs to?" The preserved figure's armor was a work of art in itself, layered plates of unknown metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon systems were integrated directly into the suit, turning the wearer into a walking arsenal. This wasn't just a ship captain, it was a weapon system with a consciousness, as if responding to his words. The tactical displays suddenly blazed to life with brilliant intensity. Ancient screens flickered with targeting data, stellar coordinates, and weapon system diagnostics. The bridge hummed with renewed energy as systems that had slept for millennia began their awakening sequence. Deep within the ship's hull, something vast and mechanical began to stir. The sound was subtle at first, a low humming that seemed to come from the very bones of the vessel. But it grew stronger, more insistent. Like a giant heartbeat returning to life, the figure on the throne twitched. Just a small movement, barely perceptible, but enough to make every Corvin on the bridge freeze in absolute terror. The implications were staggering. This thing wasn't dead. It had been waiting. And now, after millennia of patient slumber, it was waking up. What happened next would reveal the true meaning of human determination and the terrifying power that comes from refusing to surrender, even in the face of impossible odds. But that's a lesson that connects directly to something we all face in our daily lives. The incredible force that builds when small actions compound over time into unstoppable momentum. The first warning came as a whisperer, barely perceptible. Hum that vibrated through the prophet's edge like a tuning fork struck against the universe itself. Commander Vex felt it in his bones before his instruments even registered the change. Something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of space around the ancient derelict. Then the alarms exploded into life. Every sensor on the Corvin salvage ship screamed warnings as massive energy. Readings spiked from the supposedly dead vessel. The numbers climbing across Vex's displays were impossible power outputs that shouldn't exist. Energy levels that defied every known law of physics. His most advanced sensors were registering readings that would have been impressive for an entire fleet, not a single ship. "Sir, those readings can't be accurate," stammered his sensor operator, frantically recalibrating his equipment. "Surge is off the charts. It's like someone just lit a star inside that thing." But Vex knew better. He'd been salvaging long enough to recognize the signs of weapon systems coming online. The ancient vessel's hull was beginning to glow with energy distribution patterns, massive capacitors that had slept for eons crackling with barely contained fury. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't as dead as they'd thought. "Get our people out." "Of there," he screamed into the comm system, his voice cracking with panic. "Emergency extraction, now!"
Ow.
But it was already too late. Inside the Dreadnought, the boarding party found themselves facing a nightmare they couldn't have imagined. The ship around them was coming alive with malevolent purpose. Blast doors that had stood open for millennia suddenly slammed shut with pneumatic hisses, sealing the Corvins inside like insects in amber. The sound echoed through the corridors with the finality of a tomb closing. "Emergency exit protocols." Activated team leader Grax barked into his comm. But his cutting equipment was useless against doors designed to withstand orbital bombardment. They were trapped in a ship that was rapidly transforming from a derelict into something far more dangerous. The ship's interior lights shifted from emergency amber to combat red, bathing everything in the color of blood and warfare. The transformation was systematic, purposeful, like a sleeping giant opening its eyes. Emergency lighting gave way to full illumination as power systems that had been dormant for thousands of years roared back to life. Then came the voice. It echoed through the corridors with the authority of thunder and the weight of absolute command. Ancient, mechanical, but undeniably alive, it spoke words that chilled the Corvins to their core. "Intrusion detected. Initializing defensive protocols. Terra remembers." Terra. The name meant nothing to the Corvons yet, but something about the way it was spoken with reverence, with fury, with the kind of love that only comes from watching everything you care about burn made their scales crawl with primal fear. On the bridge, the preserved figure on the command throne began to move. It started small, a twitch of the fingers, a slight shift in posture. But then, cybernetic implants along his skull sparked to life like lightning dancing across metal, and eyes that had been closed for millennia snapped open, glowing with electric blue fury. This was no mere corpse. This was something far more terrifying, a fusion of flesh and machine that had transcended death itself. The figure's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision as backup life support systems engaged, pumping synthetic blood through organic veins while neural implants rebooted after their impossibly long sleep. Captain Jack Morrison rose from his throne with the deliberate grace of a predator. Servo motors whined as his augmented frame straightened to its full, imposing height. The Corvin intruders cowered before this nightmare fusion of man and machine, their weapons seeming pathetically inadequate against the adaptive armor that shifted and adjusted to their presence. Morrison's appearance was a masterpiece of military engineering taken to its logical extreme. Half his face was original human flesh, scarred and weathered by countless battles. The other half was a cybernetic marvel, sensors, targeting systems, and communication arrays integrated so seamlessly that it was impossible to tell where man ended and machine began. "Well," Morrison said, his voice carrying a hint of dark amusement, "I wasn't expecting visitors. Though I suppose, after nearly 4,000 years, I should have known someone would eventually come knocking." His voice was a grinding mixture of organic vocal cords and mechanical amplification, each word carrying the weight of authority earned through fire and blood. The sound sent shivers through the Corvon boarding party, who had never heard anything quite so terrifying. "Status report," Morrison commanded, and the ship itself seemed to snap to attention. The AI's response came with clinical efficiency. "Captain Morrison, you have been in stasis for 3,847 years. Hull integrity at 67%. Weapon systems." There was a pause, almost dramatic in its timing. Fully operational. Morrison's cybernetic eye fixed on the terrified aliens with the intensity of a targeting laser. The organic eye followed, A moment later, and the combined effect was like being stared at by death itself. These creatures had made the mistake of waking something that was supposed to stay buried. "Show me what dares to disturb the dead," Morrison growled, his augmented fingers already interfacing with the ship's tactical systems. The main display flickered to life, revealing the Corvin salvage fleet in all its pathetic glory. Enhanced vision analyzed their ships with contempt primitive designs. Weak weapons, shields that wouldn't stop a determined sneeze. These weren't warriors, they were scavengers, bottom feeders, who made their living off the bones of better civilizations. Scavengers, he muttered, and the word carried all the disgust of a soldier who had fought for something greater than profit. They think they can pick through our remains like vultures. But Morrison was about to teach them a lesson about the true meaning of human determination, about what happens when you compound small advantages over time until they become an unstoppable force. The galaxy was about to remember why some sleeping giants should never be awakened. What followed next would demonstrate the awesome power of preparation, its persistence, and the kind of strategic thinking that turns disadvantages into victories. It's the same principle that drives success in every area of life, the incredible force that builds when you refuse to give up and keep building. One small action at a time, the main display flickered to life with the harsh clarity of a judgment. Being passed. Morrison's cybernetic eye interfaced directly with the ship's sensors, zooming in on the Corvin fleet formations with the precision of a sniper scope. What he saw made his lip curl in contempt. 7 ships arranged in a loose salvage formation, their hulls scarred and patched from countless raids on dead civilizations. "Scavengers," he growled, his voice dripping with the kind of disgust reserved for the lowest forms of life. They dare to board the Retribution? The analysis flowing through his neural implants painted a picture of technological inferiority so complete it was almost insulting. Their energy signatures were primitive, their weapons outdated by millennia, their shields barely stronger than tissue paper. These weren't warriors, they were carrion feeders who had grown fat on the bones of better civilizations. Morrison's organic eye narrowed as he studied their leader's vessel. The Prophet's Edge was typical of its kind of heavily modified transport, ship bristling with salvage equipment and low-grade weapons. Its hull bore the scars of 1,000 salvage operations, each mark a testament to the crew's willingness to profit from others' destruction. "Captain," the AI's voice cut through his analysis, respectful yet urgent. "Our mission parameters clearly state our mission ended when Earth burned." Morrison interrupted, his augmented fists clenching with mechanical precision. The sound of servos whining under stress filled the bridge like the growl of a caged predator. When the colonies fell, when humanity's last children were scattered to the void like seeds on barren ground, the pain in his voice was raw, unfiltered by time or technology. Even after nearly 4,000 years, the wounds were still fresh. Morrison had watched his species' final desperate stand, had seen the last human worlds consumed by fire and genocide. He was a relic of a war that had ended with humanity's complete annihilation. But these parasites, he continued, his voice building to a crescendo of rage, have made a fatal mistake. They've awakened something that should have stayed buried. His neural interface synchronized with the ship's weapons systems, and the Retribution responded like a living thing. Plasma conduits that had been dormant for millennia suddenly blazed with contained stellar fire. Missile bays that had been sealed since the last battle began cycling through their automated preparation sequences. The ship's entire structure vibrated with barely contained power. The Retribution hadn't been built for exploration or diplomacy. It was humanity's last dreadnought, conceived in desperation and forged in the fires of total war. Every system, every weapon, every piece of armor had been designed with one purpose: to make humanity's enemies pay the ultimate price for their victory. Morrison's augmented fingers danced across holographic controls that appeared in the air, around him like deadly flowers blooming in response to his touch. Targeting systems that could track 1,000,000 objects simultaneously came online. Point defense networks that could swat aside entire missile swarms activated with predatory patience. "You know what the difference is between us and them?" Morrison asked, though no one was there to answer. They fight for profit. They fought for survival. And when you're fighting for survival, you don't just build weapons, you build nightmares. The bridge hummed with power as ancient weapon systems came online one by one. Through the viewports, the Corvin fleet suddenly found themselves facing not an ancient relic, but a fully operational instrument of human vengeance. Their sensors would be screaming warnings now, detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist. All hands? This is Captain Morrison. His voice boomed through the ship's internal communications, reaching every corner of the massive vessel. We are humanity's final echo. It's the last song of a species that refused to die quietly. Even though most of the ship was empty, automated systems responded to his words. Defensive protocols activated, emergency bulkheads sealed, and weapon systems ran through their final preparation sequences. The Retribution was transforming from a tomb into a weapon of mass destruction. These scavengers think they can pick through our remains like vultures, Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. They believe that death has made us weak. Let's remind the galaxy why they feared us when we were alive. The tactical display showed the Corvin fleet beginning to scatter, their primitive sensors finally registering the massive energy buildup. But it was too late. Can't outrun light, and you certainly can't outrun human determination backed by weapons that could crack planets. Morrison's cybernetic. I fixed on Commander Vex's flagship with the intensity of a targeting laser. The Corvin commander would be panicking now, screaming orders at his crew, trying to understand how a dead ship had suddenly become their worst nightmare. But fear was just the beginning. Fire, Morrison whispered, and the galaxy remembered terror. The Retribution's first salvo lit up the Terminus Nebula like a newborn star. Plasma cannons that could sterilize continents spoke with voices of pure destruction. The silence of space was shattered by the fury of a species that had learned to pack their entire civilization's rage into weapons designed to make their enemies regret ever being born. What happened next would demonstrate the awesome power of preparation, persistence, and the kind of strategic thinking that turns the impossible into the inevitable. It's the same principle that drives success in every area of life, the incredible force that builds when you refuse to give up and keep building, one devastating advantage at a time. The first volley from the Retribution was a masterpiece of calculated destruction. 3 Corvin cruisers simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that their atoms scattered across the nebula like cosmic dust. There was no explosion, no dramatic fireball, just the sudden absence of matter where starships had been moments before. Morrison's laughter echoed through the bridge, sound that would have chilled the blood of any human who heard it. But there were no humans left to hear it, only the mechanical precision of his ship's weapon systems, dormant for millennia, now roaring back to life with the fury of a species that had learned to pack their entire civilization's rage into. Instruments of war? Impossible. Commander Vex screamed from his flagship's bridge, his voice cracking with disbelief as his shields buckled under the assault. That ship is ancient. It should be scrap metal floating in the void. But Vex was learning the hard way that age doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means refinement. The Retribution represented the final evolution of human military technology, every lesson learned from 1,000 battlefields. Every innovation born from desperate necessity, all compressed into one perfect killing machine. Morrison had awakened. Something more than just a ship. It awakened a legend that had been sleeping in the darkness between stars, waiting for someone foolish enough to disturb its rest. The Retribution moved with predatory grace, its engines burning with the fury of a dead civilization that refused to go quietly into the night. Every shot was calculated with mathematical precision. Every maneuver was designed for maximum psychological impact. This wasn't just warfare, it was psychological terrorism on a galactic scale, executed by someone who understood that fear was often more powerful than firepower. The Corvin fleet scattered like startled insects, their formation dissolving into chaos as panic overtook military discipline. But running from the Retribution was like trying to outrun your own shadow. The ancient Dreadnought's targeting systems could track every vessel simultaneously, predicting their movements with the cold certainty of advanced mathematics. You want to know what this is? Morrison's voice crackled across all frequencies, his rage boiling over like molten metal. This is what happens when you disturb the grave of humanity. We were a species that turned war into art, destruction into poetry. And it was true. Retribution's attack patterns were beautiful in their efficiency, terrible in their precision. Each plasma burst was placed with surgical accuracy, each missile salvo timed to create maximum devastation. The ship fought like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction. Every weapon system playing its part in perfect harmony. One by one, the Corvin ships fell. Their plasma cannons couldn't penetrate the Dreadnought's adaptive armor, which shifted and adjusted to counter each attack. Their missiles were swatted aside by point defense systems that calculated trajectories faster than thought, intercepting projectiles with the casual efficiency of a human swatting flies. Commander Vex's flagship, the Prophet's Edge, lasted longer than the others, not because it was better armed, but because Morrison was saving it for last. The Corvin commander watched in horror as his entire fleet was systematically dismantled by what he had thought was a derelict hulk. "Please," Vex transmitted desperately, "we didn't know. We're just salvagers. We meant no harm." Morrison's response was a plasma bolt that sheared off the Prophet's Edge's main engine. The ship tumbled helplessly through space, its crew screaming as gravity failed and emergency systems struggled to maintain life support. "Harm?" Morrison's voice was ice cold now, devoid of the earlier rage. "You think this is about harm? This is about respect. It's about remembering that some graves shouldn't be disturbed." The final shot was almost gentle, a precisely placed energy burst that vaporized the Prophet's Edge's command center, ending Commander Vex's life in a flash of brilliant light. The last enemy vessel exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the nebula like a dying star, its debris joining the cosmic graveyard that had birthed this confrontation. As the last echoes of battle faded, Morrison slumped back into his command throne, the thrill of victory mixed with the hollow ache of being the last of his kind. He had won, but what did victory mean when there was no one left to celebrate it with? "Status report," he commanded, his voice now cold and determined. "All enemy vessels neutralized, Captain. Hull integrity holding at 67%. Weapon systems cycling down to standby mode." Morrison stared out at the debris field that had once been a salvage fleet. 7 ships, dozens of crew members, all reduced to scattered atoms because they had made the mistake of waking something that should have stayed buried. "Set course for the core worlds," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of terrible purpose. It's time the galaxy remembered what humans were capable of. The Retribution turned toward the stars, its engines burning bright against the void. The ancient Dreadnought began its journey toward civilized space, carrying the last echo of humanity's wrath into a galaxy that had thawed itself. Safe from the species that had once made the universe tremble in the depths of space, automated monitoring stations detected the energy signature and began broadcasting warnings across 1,000 worlds. The message was simple, terrible, and absolutely true. The humans have returned. Morrison smiled as he felt the ship's engines engage, carrying him toward a destiny that had been delayed by millennia but never truly abandoned. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson about the power of compounding, how small actions, repeated over time, can build into forces that reshape entire civilizations. Asterisk, asterisk, the end. Asterisk, asterisk. Just like Morrison's awakening demonstrated the incredible power that builds when preparation meets opportunity. There's another force in our universe that works the same way, growing quietly, steadily, until it becomes unstoppable. If you want to discover how this same principle can transform your own life, check out my next video about the amazing power of compounding.